Alright, welcome back. Machiaveli, Auto War, motherfucking book 1 from 1594. Cosimo, I don't know if with my question I've gone outside the limits you set, but from the latter we have entered into another discussion, and if I should be excused a little, I shall believe I merit some reproach. Fabrizio, this did us no harm, for all the discussion was necessary in wanting to discuss the organization of an army, for which being censured by many, it was necessary to explain that if it were desired, we should take place before the diletto. And before I discuss the other parts, I want to discuss the diletto for men on horseback. This selection was done by the ancients from among the more wealthy, having regard for both age and quality of men, selecting 300 for each legion, so that the Roman cavalry in every consular army did not exceed 600. Cosimo, did you organize the cavalry in order to train them at home and avail yourself of them in the future? Fabrizio, actually it is a necessity and cannot be done otherwise. If you want to have them take arms for you and do not want to take them away from those who make profession of them. Cosimo, how would you select them? Fabrizio, I would imitate the Romans. I would take the more wealthy and give them leaders in the same manners that they were given others today. And I would arm them and train them. Cosimo, would it be well to give these men some provision? Fabrizio, yes indeed, but only as much as necessary to take care of their horse. For as it begins the expense of your subjects, they would complain to you. It would be necessary, therefore, to pay them for their horse and its upkeep. Cosimo, how many would you make? How would you arm them? Fabrizio, you pass into another discussion. I will tell you in its place, which will be when I have said how the infantry ought to be armed and how they should prepare for an engagement. Second book. I believe that it is necessary, once the men are found, to arm them, and one thing to do this, I believe it necessary to examine what arms the ancients used, and from them to select the best. The Romans divided their infantry into heavily and lightly armored. The light armed they gave the name machiaveli. Under this name they included all those who operated with the sling, crossbow, and darts. The greater part of them carried a helmet, head covering, and a shield in the front for the arm for defense. These men fought outside the regular ranks and apart from the heavy armor, which was the casque. That came up to the shoulders and also carried a cuirass, which with the skirt came down to the knees, and with their arms and legs were covered by shin guards and bracelets. They also carried a shield in their arms, 2 arms in length and 1 in width, which had an iron hoop on it to be able to sustain a blow, and another underneath, so that in rubbing on the ground it should not be worn out. For attacking, they had clinched on their left side a sword of an arm and a half length and a dagger on the right side. They carried a spear called a pilus, which they hurled at the enemy at the start of the battle. These were the important Roman arms in which they conquered the world. And although some of the ancient writers also gave them, in addition to an aforementioned arms, a shaft in the hand in the manner of a spit, I do not know how a staff could be used if one holds a shield, for in managing it with 2 hands it is impeded by the shield, and he cannot do anything worthwhile with one hand because of its heaviness. In addition to this, to combat in the ranks with the staff of its arms is useless, except in the front rank where the simple space to deploy the entire staff, which cannot be done in the inner ranks because of the nature of the battalions, as I will tell you in their organization. Alright, so we're going to pause right here and I'm going to break some shit down. See, this is the 1500s. Actually, this is 1520, right? And they're still arguing about how history is wrote down the same way we do today. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're standing here trying to figure out exactly what the truth is, what the truth isn't. The same way we do today about how things are written. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not real sure if that even fucking actually existed, because some people said it did, some people said it didn't. And we go through the same thing because things weren't written down, you know what I mean, in a manner in which matched everybody. You know what I'm saying? There was no consistency. There's the word I'm looking for. All right, let's continue. It is to press the rank continually close together, as this is feared less, and even through the inconvenient for the ranks to spread further apart, where the danger is most apparent, so that all the arms which exceeded 2 arms in length are useless in tight places. For if you have a staff and want to use it in both hands, and handled so that the shield should not annoy you, you cannot attack an enemy with it who is next to you. If you take it in one hand in order to serve yourself in the shield, you cannot pick it up except in the middle, and there remains so much of the staff in the back part that those who are behind impeding you in using it, and that this is true that the Romans did not have the staff, or having it they valued it little. You will read in all the engagements noted by Titus Livius in this history, where you will see that only very rarely is mentioned the shaft. Rather, he always says that after hurling the spears, they put their hands on their sword. Therefore, I want to lead this staff and relate how the Romans used the sword for the offense and for defense. their shield together with their other arms mentioned above. The Greeks did not arm so heavily for defense as the Romans, but in the offensive relied more on the staff than for the sword, and especially in the phalanxes of Macedonia, who carried staff which they called a cerise, a good 10 arms in length, in which they opened the ranks of the enemy and maintained order in the phalanxes. And although other writers said they also had a shield, I do not know, for the reasons given above. See what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying right there? How the cerise and the shield could exist together. In addition to this, in the engagement of the Paulus Aemilius had with the Perusius, king of Macedonia, I do not remember mention being made of the shields, but only of a cerise, and the difficulty the Romans had in overcoming them. So that I conjectured that a Macedonian's phalanx was nothing more than a battalion of Swiss as today, who have all their strength and power in their pikes. The Romans, in addition to the arms, ornamented the infantry with plumes, which things make the sight of an army beautiful to friends and terrible to the enemy. The arms for men on horseback in the original ancient Roman army was a rounded shield. They had their head covered but the rest of the body without armor. They had a sword and staff on an iron pike, long and thin. Once they were unable to hold the shield firm and only make weak movements with the staff because they had no armor. They were exposed to wounds. Afterwards, with time, they were armed like the infantry. But the shield was much smaller and square, and the staff more solid with 2 iron tips, so that if the one side was encumbered, they could always avail themselves of the other. With these arms, both for the infantry and the cavalry, my Romans occupied all the world, and it must be believed that the fruits that are observed, that they were the best armed armies that ever existed. And Titus Livius in his history gives many proofs wherein, coming to the comparison with the enemy arms, he says, but the Romans were superior in virtue, kinds of arms, and discipline, and therefore I discussed more in particular arms of the victors than those of the losers. It appears proper to me that to discuss only the present methods of arming. The infantry have for the defense a breastplate of iron, and for the offense a lance 9 arm lengths long, which they call a pike, and a sword at their side, rather round than a point than a sharp. This is an ordinary armament of the infantry today. For few have their arms and shins protected by armor, no one the head, and those who few carry a halberd in place of a pike, the shaft of which is 3 arm lengths long, and the iron attached as an axe. Among them they have 3 scapatieri exploders, i.e. gunners, who with their burst of fire fill the office with anciently was done by slingers and bowmen. This is the beginning of guns, you know what I'm saying? These are like blunderbusses, is basically the situation, right? This method of arming was established by the Germans, and especially the Swiss, who being poor and wanting to live in freedom, wherein are obligated to combat with the ambitions of the princes of Germany, who were rich and could raise horses, which that people could not do because of poverty. Whence it happened that being on foot and wanting to defend themselves from the enemy on horseback, it behooved them to search the ancient owners and find arms that should defend them from the fury of horses. This necessity has caused them to maintain or rediscover the ancient orders, without which every prudent man affirms the infantry is entirely useless. They therefore take up pikes as arms, which are most useful not only in sustaining the attacks of horses, but to overcome them. And because of the virtue of these arms in the ancient orders, the Germans have assumed so much audacity that 15 or 20,000 of them would assault any great number of horse. And there have been many examples of this seen in the last 25 years. And this, the example of their virtue founded on these arms, and how these orders have been so powerful that the King Charles passed into Italy, every nation has imitated them, so that the Spanish armies have come into very great reputation. So basically what he's saying is that the Swiss stood there and studied the ancient ways of doing things and found a way of doing shit that was so powerful that everybody else kind of copied them throughout the world and became world renowned. And now the Spanish even found a better way of doing it, and they now have a great reputation of doing it. But this is in 1520. Cosimo, what method of arms do you praise more? This Germans or one of the ancient Roman? Fabrizio, the Roman without any doubt, and I will tell you the good and bad of one and the other. The German infantry can sustain and overcome the cavalry. They are more expeditious in marching and organizing themselves because they are not burdened with arms. On the other hand, they are exposed to blows from near and far because of the being unarmed. They are useless in land battles and in every fight where there is a stalwart resistance, but the Romans sustained and overcame the cavalry as these Germans do. They were safe from blows near and far because they were covered with armor. They were better able to attack and sustain attacks, having the shields, and they could actively in tight places avail themselves of the sword than these Germans with the pike. And even if the latter had the sword being without a shield, they become in such case equally useless. They, the Romans, could safely assault towns, having the body covered and being able to cover it even better than with the shield, so that they had no other inconvenience than with the heaviness of the arms and armor. And the annoyance of having to carry them, which inconveniences they overcame by accustoming the body to hardships, introducing it to endure hard work. And you know we do not suffer from things that we are accustomed. So basically what he's saying is that, it's kind of like, I don't know if you ever seen that Samurai Jack episode where, he goes, "You can fly?" He goes, "No, I jump good." Right? Where, they kept putting like heavier and heavy rocks on it, so the motherfucker jumped like 10 feet tall. That's kind of the situation. And you must understand this, that the infantry must be able to fight with infantry and cavalry, and those who are always useless cannot sustain the attacks of the cavalry. Or if they are able to sustain them, none of the less have fear of infantry, who are better armed and organized than they. Now, if you will consider the German and the Roman infantry, you will find in the German, as we have said, the aptitude of overcoming cavalry, but the great disadvantage is when fighting with an infantry organized as they are, and armed as the Romans, so that there will be this advantage of one over the other, that the Romans could overcome both the infantry and cavalry, and the Germans only the cavalry. Well, I'm going to stop right there because we're at 11 and a half minutes right now in this motherfucker, man. I want to thank y'all for tuning in and learning some new shit today. You know what I'm saying? This is Tom Pease with Pinoy News. Like the content, like, share, and subscribe. You know how we get down. I'll holler at you later. Peace.